Imagine for a second that your new roommate is a chain-smoking, dangerously charming Royal Navy commander.
Right.
He likes to play the flute. He is endlessly fascinated by your refrigerator.
Yeah.
And he has a habit of completely dismantling your plumbing. Oh, and one minor detail. He actually died in the Arctic in the year 1847.
Which is just a brilliant hook.
It really is.
Yeah.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping straight into the incredibly vivid, mind-bending world of Kaliane Bradley's novel, The Ministry of Time.
Yeah, and the mission of this deep dive today is to really unpack the logistics, the absolutely hilarious culture clashes, and the deeply sinister conspiracy behind this near-future British government project.
Right, the project is pulling people out of doomed historical events.
Exactly. The premise alone is phenomenal, but what makes this source material so compelling for you to explore is that it completely subverts the standard sci-fi time travel adventure.
Well,
at its core, it operates as a profound and honestly often uncomfortable examination of trauma, the lingering legacy of colonialism, and what it actually means to assimilate into an entirely new reality.
I mean, the novel uses these fantastic speculative elements to dissect very grounded, real-world human conditions.
It does.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the actual mechanics of how this near-future ministry functions, because time travel usually brings up immediate questions about paradoxes, right?
Oh, absolutely. The classic butterfly effect.
Right, stepping on a butterfly and erasing modern civilization.
Yeah.
To bypass that, the government established a strict rule. They only extract individuals they call expats from history who are on the absolute brink of death.
Which is a very clever workaround. If history already recorded them as dying in that exact moment, removing them shouldn't disrupt the timeline at all.
Exactly. But the physical reality of doing that to a human being is something else entirely. How does the human body actually handle being ripped out of the past?
Well, it doesn't handle it well at all. The text highlights a horrific physical toll. I mean, the ministry originally attempted to pull 7 people forward through time, but 2 of them died in transit.
2 out of 7. That is a massive failure rate.
It is. The sheer temporal force is devastating. The survivors don't arrive looking like pristine museum exhibits. They arrive completely battered.
Right.
Take Commander Graham Gore, for example. Rescued from the doomed Franklin expedition in the Arctic in 1847, he drops into the 21st century suffering from pneumonia, severe frostnip, the early stages of scurvy, and broken toes.
Just completely wrecked. And because he was pulled from a survival situation, didn't he actually shoot at the extraction team?
He did. He fired a gun at his rescuers in the Arctic before being repeatedly sedated.
It is a violent uprooting. And the roster of the people who survived this extraction gives you a fascinating cross-section of British history.
It's a very eclectic group.
Yeah. You have Margaret Kemble, pulled from 1665 during the Great Plague of London. Thomas Cartingham, a soldier from the 1645 Battle of Naseby. Anne Spencer, extracted from the terror of the 1793 French Revolution.
Arthur Reginald Smith is another big one.
Right, an army captain plucked directly from the horrific trenches of the 1916 Battle of the Somme. And of course, Commander Gore.
And to manage these individuals, the ministry hires modern people called bridges to cohabit with them for a year.
Which brings us to our narrator. She's a former Ministry of Defense translator whose mother was a Cambodian refugee, and she's assigned to live with Gore. But immediately there's this massive semantic debate happening within the ministry walls regarding how to label these people.
Yeah, the terminology is a crucial battleground in the text. The ministry rigidly insists on the term expats.
Right.
And that word carries a specific connotation. It implies a voluntary, leisurely relocation, perhaps for career or lifestyle reasons. It completely sanitizes the situation.
It really does. However, the narrator and her colleague, Semelia, argue forcefully that these people are, by every international definition, traumatized refugees.
Exactly. I mean, they have been forcibly displaced from war zones, plagues, and disasters. Arthur, the World War I captain, spends his early days in the 21st century convinced he is trapped behind enemy lines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Margaret Kemble genuinely believes she has succumbed to the plague and is currently wandering the afterlife.
So labeling them expats is really just a bureaucratic mechanism for the government to avoid the ethical responsibilities owed to refugees.
Precisely.
Think about your own daily routine for a second. Now imagine trying to explain the concept of your refrigerator or your Wi-Fi router to a guy sitting on your couch who literally fought in the Opium Wars.
It's just an incredible mental image.
It is. The culture shock of bringing a 19th century Victorian explorer into a modern London home provides some of the most entertaining anecdotes in the entire book.
Oh, the fridge scene is classic.
Yes. Gore encounters the modern fridge and is utterly mesmerized. He views it essentially as a magical icebox powered by lightning.
Powered by lightning. I love that.
And his curiosity doesn't stop there. He completely dismantles the modern toilet, trying to understand the inner workings of 21st century plumbing.
Leaves the cistern gleaming on the bathroom floor like a slain whale.
Like a slain whale, exactly.
What's fascinating here is how the ministry attempts to manage this overwhelming culture shock through a psychological framework they call the language hypothesis.
Right, the language hypothesis.
Yeah, the government scientists theorize that using accurate modern vocabulary is the specific mechanism that anchors these historical figures to the present day. It operates as a literal survival mechanism based on linguistic relativity.
So, meaning the words they use physically keep them in the present.
Exactly. The theory suggests that if Gore stubbornly insists on calling a car a horseless carriage, he is cognitively rejecting his current reality. By forcing him to use the word car, he conceptually tethers himself to the present. The ministry believes that if the expats fail to linguistically adapt, the temporal displacement will catch up with them and physically destroy them. They are essentially forcing cognitive behavioral therapy on them via vocabulary just to keep them alive.
Which means the narrator is tasked with constantly correcting him. And Gore is an incredibly stubborn student.
Very stubborn.
He develops an absolute visceral horror at the modern concept of microscopic germs.
Right, the invisible bugs.
Yeah, when the narrator tries to explain that invisible bugs are everywhere, covering our skin and our surfaces, Gore holds his hands entirely away from his body, treating them like they are rabid rats.
He hates modern London, too.
Despises the crowding and the endless cars. He complains bitterly that there are no longer any horizons, only buildings and people.
And television.
Oh, he absolutely refuses to engage with television, famously zeroing in on Sesame Street and declaring it a deformed monstrosity against the will of God.
A deformed monstrosity against the will of God. That is just incredible. But the sensory overload of the 21st century assaults his Victorian sensibilities at every turn, yet the narrative doesn't paint him as a complete Luddite. There are specific modern marvels he deeply embraces.
Like Spotify. He becomes entirely obsessed with Spotify.
Yes.
The concept that he can summon Johann Sebastian Bach or a Motown track out of the invisible ether endlessly at any hour of the day completely blows his mind.
He sits there typing incredibly slowly on a modern laptop with a single finger just to pull up symphonies.
Just picking at the keys. But beneath that newfound appreciation for streaming music, he still has that intense 19th century explorer itch. He feels a deep-seated need to exert control over his environment and act as a provider.
Which leads to the squirrel incident.
Right. To satisfy those hunting urges in suburban London, he takes a modern air rifle, methodically shoots every single squirrel in their back garden, and stacks them in a morbid little furry cairn.
Completely baffling the narrator when she walks outside.
I mean, can you imagine?
It's hilarious. But the squirrel incident provides wonderful levity, but it serves a very specific narrative purpose. It acts as a bridge into the deeper, significantly more complex identity politics explored in the story.
How so?
Well, the narrator brings a highly specific personal lens to her role as a bridge. Because her mother fled the Cambodian genocide and because of her previous work translating for the Ministry of Defense, she is intimately familiar with the bureaucratic reality of being an internally displaced person.
Right.
She recognizes that Commander Gore, despite his stiff upper lip and Victorian bravado, is also fundamentally internally displaced. He is forever a naval officer of the British Empire, completely trapped inside a modern London townhouse.
And that internal displacement creates a tremendous amount of friction between them. Gore is undeniably charming, but he remains a man whose worldview was forged in the 1830s and 40s.
Yes, he was an active participant in British imperialism.
He was. He casually uses outdated, highly offensive terminology. He refers to the narrator as half-caste, and he calls Somalia, who is a highly educated black psychologist, and a fellow bridge, a negress.
And if you were in the narrator's shoes, how do you even begin to address that chasm in understanding?
Exactly. You are dealing with someone who proudly helped conquer the port of Aden for the British Empire, and you have to explain modern concepts like structural racism or carbon neutrality. And as we discuss this, we're just reporting on the intense themes of the book, but it really highlights the massive cultural divide.
The power dynamics in those interactions are incredibly layered. The narrator doesn't immediately launch into a 21st century lecture on political correctness. She makes a calculated choice to hide behind her own white passing features to maintain a sense of bureaucratic authority over him.
It is a complex survival tactic.
It really is. She actively suppresses her own family's generational trauma and her own marginalized identity because she calculates that maintaining a facade of clinical governmental control is the only way to manage this impossible situation. She is trying to protect herself just as much as she is trying to manage him.
And the ministry itself seems determined to break down any protective facades through their deeply unsettling psychological evaluation.
Oh, the exams.
Yes, they subject the expats to what they casually refer to as empathy exams. They force these historical figures into a room and make them look at horrific modern images.
Specifically, the devastating mechanized weapons developed during and after World War I.
Right. The stated goal is to test their capacity for empathy in this new era, but the actual result is profound traumatization. Arthur, the World War I captain, is so triggered by the images of modern warfare that he has to be heavily sedated.
The clinical cruelty of the ministry extends to the modern staff as well. The bridges are subjected to their own rigorous evaluations known as honesty exams.
And these aren't simple check-ins.
No, they are literal polygraph tests administered by the intensely sinister Vice Secretary Adela. Adela monitors the lie detector needles jumping while asking the narrator highly invasive, deeply personal questions about her evolving relationship with Gore.
It completely strips away any illusion of privacy. The ministry views the expats entirely as experimental data points, and they view the bridges as disposable monitoring equipment.
Yet despite the ministry treating them all like lab rats, a genuine, profound community begins to form.
Yes, when the expats are finally granted permission to interact with each other, the scenes are incredibly heartwarming.
You have to picture this group of people, each profoundly lonely and entirely isolated from their own timelines, finding enormous solace in the only other humans who understand their specific temporal displacement.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these scenes showcase the sheer resilience of the human spirit. They are forging bonds across centuries, finding common ground in their shared alienation from the present.
The dinner party scene is a perfect example of this.
Picture Margaret Kemble, a woman whose defining life experience was surviving the bubonic plague in 1665. She shows up to a modern gathering wearing high-waisted cerulean bell-bottoms.
It's such a great image.
She is absolutely marveling at the mechanical genius of the zipper, and based on a few things she's read, she enthusiastically declares herself a feminist killjoy. It is such a triumphant, joyful image of adaptation.
And then you have the ministry talent show.
Oh, the talent show.
The bureaucratic staff expects some stiff historical presentation, but Arthur and Gore take the stage and perform a fully choreographed Motown dance routine to a Jackson 5 song,
leaving the uptight ministry officials completely speechless.
And later that night, back at the house, the narrator is smoking legalized weed in the kitchen and teaching a tipsy Arthur Reginald Smith how to do the electric slide.
The joy in those moments is palpable, but the narrative never lets you forget the heavy, lingering grief running just beneath the surface.
That's the tragic part.
The humor, the Motown, the dancing, it frequently acts as a mask. Arthur isn't just a fun guy learning a line dance. He is suffering from severe, untreated PTSD from the horrors of trench warfare at the Somme.
And Gore is carrying an almost unimaginable weight of survivor's guilt.
That guilt stems from a devastating revelation. Gore eventually learns from the narrator that the rest of his crew on the Franklin expedition did not survive.
Right, because after he was pulled through the time door by the extraction team, the remaining 120-plus men on those ships slowly starved to death on the Arctic ice.
The weight of that knowledge is crushing. He occasionally drops these horrifying casual details from his past voyages. He talks about surviving 10 straight months trapped in pack ice on a ship that had to be physically wrapped in massive chains just to stop the ice from crushing the hull.
Wow.
He also shares a haunting, visceral memory of being out on the ice completely snowblind and accidentally shooting an Inuit man because he mistook his silhouette for a seal.
The text makes it abundantly clear that trauma of that magnitude doesn't simply vanish because you introduce someone to Spotify, central heating, and a refrigerator. Their past remains their present.
Absolutely.
The ministry's entire foundational assertion that these individuals can simply assimilate away their history through language and exposure to the modern world is proven to be a deeply flawed, arrogant assumption.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because just as you start to think this is a quirky story about domestic adaptation, the narrator buys a bicycle, she buys this ridiculous novelty bag shaped like a chicken. She's really trying to build a normal, quiet life with gore.
Right, playing house.
Yeah. But then the ministry's carefully constructed, bureaucratic facade begins to crack, and it cracks violently. The story takes a sharp turn into thriller territory.
The unraveling begins with a technological anomaly.
Tell us about that.
Well, Anne Spencer, the expat pulled from the 1793 French Revolution, starts registering on the ministry's medical MRI scanners.
She just disappears from the scans.
Yes. Physically, she is standing right there in the room, but technologically, she is becoming invisible to the 21st century.
And the narrator accidentally overhears the creepy military oversight officer, known only as the Brigadier, explaining this terrifying phenomenon to another agent.
He casually claims it is an issue of readability.
He states that Anne lacks their idness. Her grief for her husband, who was guillotined during the terror, is so profound and consuming that it is literally physically pulling her out of the modern timeline.
The universe of the 21st century is actively rejecting her presence.
The implications of the witness are terrifying. It suggests that their physical existence in the future is entirely conditional upon their psychological compliance.
If they cannot fully let go of the past and embrace the present timeline will simply erase them. It is the ultimate brutal enforcement of assimilation.
But the actual turning point of the entire narrative happens on a routine afternoon. Gore is out for a walk and observes a ministry agent using a strange device.
Right.
When he returns, he sketches it from memory for the narrator. He draws a handheld machine that projects a complex three-dimensional grid into the air.
And the narrator, operating on the assumption that Gore is just a Victorian man confused by modern technology, figures it's a new video game console or a surveying gadget.
But, following protocol, she passes the sketch along to her handler, a man named Quentin.
And Quentin's reaction shatters the illusion of the entire ministry project. He doesn't laugh it off as a Victorian misunderstanding. He goes into an absolute visceral panic.
He immediately starts aggressively printing out a massive, multi-page Wikipedia article about a prehistoric mass extinction event.
Just for the noise.
Exactly. He isn't reading it, he's just creating enough relentless printer noise to muffle the hidden listening bugs he knows are planted in his own office.
Which is such a paranoid thriller moment.
It really is. Later, he ambushes the narrator out on the heath, dressed in plain clothes, looking terrified and physically unwell. He reveals the catastrophic truth about Gore's sketch.
The device Gore saw isn't a modern gadget, it is a weapon.
And it is not a weapon from our current era. It is a weapon pulled from the future.
This revelation completely recontextualizes the entire novel. The time travel project, the hiring of the bridges, the elaborate language hypothesis, the traumatizing empathy exams, every single piece of it is a front.
A massive cover-up.
The British government was never interested in humanitarian rescue. They weren't conducting a grand experiment in historical curiosity or sociological adaptation. The Ministry of Time is a highly classified, covert military operation designed to reach further and further into the future to acquire devastating advanced weaponry.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive looking at a highly entertaining, almost sitcom-like premise. A Victorian explorer navigating modern London, discovering the magic of zippers, being utterly horrified by the concept of blue lipstick, and trying to learn how to ride a bicycle.
Right, the fun stuff.
But beneath that incredibly charming surface, the source material meticulously weaves a gripping, paranoid thriller about the brutal, self-serving machinery of the modern state.
It demands that we ask profound questions about who holds the power to write history, who is designated as expendable by the state, and what lengths governments will go to in the name of progress and absolute power.
Exactly.
Vice Secretary Adela has a deeply chilling quote earlier in the text that foreshadows this entire conspiracy. She tells the narrator, "History is a narrative agreement about what has happened."
That's a loaded statement.
When the narrator naively asks if the ministry's goal is to use time travel to go back and fix the tragedies of the past, Adela practically laughs at her. She says, "You talk about changing history, but you're trying to change the future."
The expats were selected specifically because history had already recorded them as dead. They were uniquely vulnerable, possessing no legal rights, no family, and no advocates in the present day.
They were drafted as the perfect, disposable test subjects for a machine ultimately designed for future warfare.
This raises an important question for you to mull over as you step away from this deep dive. If the government's true, hidden objective is to pull advanced apocalyptic weaponry back from the future to secure dominance in the present, what does that imply about the ultimate fate of our own timeline?
It's a dark thought.
If we are actively importing the tools of future devastation, are we inadvertently guaranteeing our own destruction? Are we, right at this very moment, destined to become the exact kind of doomed history that future generations will eventually have to extract refugees from?
That is a lingering, heavy thought to leave you with.
It really is. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.